Well, look what we have here. Hello and welcome to Lancaster Hi-Fi. I'm Stephen Lancaster. And I have here an example of the kind of gear you can get if you have time. You might recall a video I did about, how to find an amazing system on a budget, but it was really about, what you can get and how much you spend. The how much you spend is just one factor in a number of things that include sort of effort, time, flexibility, and budget. I think those were the four, something like that. But effort included both, what kind of work can you put into a piece that you pick up, and how much effort do you spend trying to find stuff. And the time part comes in where if you can wait until that deal comes up that you've been waiting for, and you have a bit of flexibility, maybe it's not exactly what you want, but, well, this is an example. I just spent $500 on this McIntosh C28. In restored condition, these generally go for $1,500 to $2,000. But this is not restored condition. Now, it wasn't even necessarily in working condition. The seller didn't, just said, I haven't tested it, I don't know if it works. And so, in my early conversation with him, I said, I can bring a small amplifier and some speakers, and I can just see if it works from the back of my rig. And I got there, and he had it actually plugged in on a table. This was in a big storage unit that he has. This guy's kind of nuts. He's got an amazing amount of stuff. Man. But he had it plugged in. I brought out my stuff, plugged in my phone to them, et cetera, and it works. Yeah, the volume pot's a little scratchy. You'd expect that for something 50 years old. But you'd also generally expect that a McIntosh that's not beat to hell is probably in working condition. Unless you have reason to believe otherwise. Just because of the people who buy McIntosh gear are the kind of people who are going to take good care of it, generally. Now, that said, this has a few condition problems. It does have the wooden case, which is nice. But, the veneer is separating a little bit along here on the top. There's some scrapes and scratches and so on in that wood veneer. A little glue, a little Howard's Restore finish, maybe some kind of other finish like Carnauba or like Brywax or Brewax. It'll look beautiful. It won't look perfect, but it'll look beautiful. And this is now a working C28. Now, it's not exactly what I've been looking for. I've had my eye out for a C20, which is the tube preamplifier predecessor to this. And there are a number, they've had a number of models. I think they're on C50 something now. But the C28 was one that they made and sold from, I think, 1971 to 1978. So they sold a lot of these. And so they're relatively common used. It's not unusual to find these. But, and so they're not the most desirable McIntosh gear, but it's still McIntosh solid state gear, and it's good. So I'm now going to take it apart. First of all, take it out of the case, see what I can see under the hood, make sure there's no problems obviously lurking under there. I've ascertained that it works, but I don't know that it works well. And I don't know that there might be, say, leaking filter capacitors or something like that that are just waiting to cause problems down the line unless they're caught early enough. So with something this old, you know, I generally take it apart before I put it into a system. And I do want to hear this. I do want to know what this sounds like. But bear with me. First things first. Don't plug it in. Take it a pat. Oh, that's an awful Australian accent. All right, it's on. I did the dim bulb tester and it's fine. Looks like some of the front panel lights are out. All of this green lettering should show up clearly. Looks like there's at least one light out over here. It actually shows it better on camera than it does by eye, and I've got all the lights off in here, although there's a lot of light from the window. So there's potentially some lights out, various spots on here, but definitely somewhere in here. Let's check out the inside. So, if you've never seen the inside of a McIntosh, here we go. This is my first time. So, some big can caps. I'll be needing to check those, make sure those are all good. And then look at all those big old film caps in there. This is really interesting because it's got components that I've just never seen before. Pretty sure these are capacitors. So, for example, it says 100/16, so that would be most likely a polarized, so minus and plus. 100 microfarad capacitor, 16 volt rating. Yeah, all these electrolytics need to be replaced at some point. And so I've ordered some where I don't have anything to go. In this case, the 3000 microfarad capacitor had just failed completely, so I went ahead and put in 3000 microfarad capacitors. Replaced some on the top as well. Yeah, these were all like 75% over spec, which means leaking. Check out inside. Got a bunch of film caps, some basic carbon composite resistors, some transistors which have some interesting colors on them. Of course, that's the input selector. I've replaced all of the electrolytics. Those were all out of spec. And kind of interesting, these relatively big Motorola transistors and the output capacitors, most of which, or not the output capacitors, the big capacitors, most of which I've needed to change. And you can see I had to get a little creative here because I didn't have parts that were exactly right, so I kind of had to make some that would come out right. You know, I will, these two, and these are all salvaged, used components. I will eventually replace those with new components. Now we'll probably go ahead and replace this one as well, just because if all the electrolytics are bad, or almost all of them are out of spec, then probably ought to replace even the ones that are still in spec, because they might not be in spec for much longer. There are a few more things that I need to test. Looks like there's a polarized capacitor right there, and I don't think I've checked that. So here's our front panel. Got balance, comp for compensation, presence, flat or loud. We've got independent bass controls for left and right, Similarly, independent treble controls for left and right. We've got a bunch of input choices here: aux, tuner, phono 1, phono 2, mic, tape head. Also for monitor, for tape input, monitor tape 1, tape 2, tape copy 1 to 2 or 2 to 1. Got a low frequency filter, a high frequency filter. We've got main and remote speaker select buttons, and headphones, tape output, tape input. We have mode selector. We've got left to left and right, right to left and right, stereo reverse, stereo, mono left plus right, left plus right to left, and left plus right to R, to right. So kind of interesting and versatile selection stuff there. Volume includes an on-off switch. We've got, of course, these pan lock buttons. So, you know, it's got lots of nice functions. I haven't checked out, actually, the loudness here. This is a three-way switch here. I think presence is going to roll off, have more mid-range. Flat is supposed to be flat, and then loud, I would assume that's where we have more of the smiley face with the emphasis on the bass and the treble. So let's check out these top panel controls. So these will be accessible by pushing the pan lock buttons, which are both invisible because of the angle, but they're pan lock buttons down on the front panel and the bottom, and you push those and you pull the whole thing out of the wooden case to this point. It locks there. And so that gives you reasonably convenient access to these top panel controls. So over here we've got bass trim. Oh, well, this is so this is interesting. So it says here normal position of controls is indicated. So bass trim, normally that's down there. Those weren't all the way to 0. That's interesting. I don't know if that might have something to do with anything. They were very close to 0 though. Left, right. Phono 1 level, that's normally all the way up. That wasn't all the way up. I think it just got jostled. Phono 2 level, typically all the way up. Headphone level, typically straight up. Output level, typically all the way up. And those were. And center channel level, typically all the way down. And then all the way over here, this is related to something on the back panel. We have power amplifier off and on. Normally this is on, although it's in the off position right now. And that's gonna control whether these power amplifier outlets back here are on or off. Control them with this switch. So if we want to plug in a power amplifier here and control it with the on-off switch on the preamp, then we would switch this to on. We can get another angle on the view inside, including the back panel there. I should show this. I forgot about all this information, which gives us a block diagram of the circuit, power supply, gives us specs, and they're not exactly as from the manual. In particular, frequency response within plus or minus 0.5 dB, 20 Hz to 20 kilohertz. And I think if we say plus or minus 0.5 dB, then yes, this frequency response of this unit is in spec. However, it does say that the high level input gain is 20 dB, 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz, and it is not. It is 18. Oh well. Let's explore the back panel a bit of the McIntosh Model C28 solid state stereo preamp. Okay, so we've got some outlets on the back, a couple labeled for the power amp, one here unswitched, and then 4 more switched. And we got fuse, of course the power cord. Alright, got something for a speaker control relay. Don't know how to hook that up. We've got main outputs. We've got 2 sets of main outputs, and both have left, center, and right. We've got a line output, which according to the specs actually has more gain. You look back over here. So auxiliary to main output 20 dB, to tape output 0 dB, to headphone/line output 30 dB. I didn't test that, but that's kind of interesting, isn't it? Here are the tape outputs. Those are supposed to be 0 dB. And then we've got 2 sets of inputs. We've got high level inputs, aux tuner, tape 1, tape 2, and low level inputs, tape head, mic, phono 1, phono 2. So that's pretty cool. We do have 2 phono inputs. These are going to be moving magnet phono inputs, of course. Tape head and mic, not super useful for us these days. I had thought of using Howard's Restore Finish on this, but instead I opted for the raw linseed oil. It means I don't have to go outside where it's hot, and I don't have to take this outside, and I don't have to put up with the smell of rotting chemicals. And, you know, the results are really nice. Now, it's not going to stay super shiny like that. The oil will cure and it'll soften up, but boy, nothing like the look of a fresh coat of linseed oil on some nice veneer. So, and it makes the whole thing smell nice. Nutty. Alright, what were you telling us, Alton, about McIntosh?
McIntosh is kind of for like snobby rich assholes, so you gotta play some shit that snobby rich assholes would play for it to sound good. Otherwise it's just fucked up.
Yeah, we were trying the Scorpions before and it just kind of sounded a little wrong.
Doesn't sound right.
But Seal
sounds pretty good.
Although there may be a tad bit of distortion in the left channel, I'm not sure. It might just be the volume pot. I tried treating the pots, but anyway. Yeah, I had to get what Alton said though. Well, I have my impression of how it sounds. It's time to put it on the bench and see whether what I think I'm hearing corresponds to what I think that ought to look like in a graph of gain versus frequency. So I'm putting in with my signal generator phone a 1/4 volt RMS, and I'm going to vary the frequency from 5 hertz all the way up to 21 kilohertz. Unfortunately, 21 kilohertz is the highest that I can go with the phone. And I'm looking at the output on the left and the right, A and B. I think that's right. Oh, no. No, that's not right. Right and left. Tell you what, instead of having to move those around, watch this. Da-da-da, scope readings. Reading 1. I'm going to change that to B. And reading 2, I'm going to change that to A. Alright, so left and right, that's now what I will enter. And I'll just move B to the top and A to the bottom, just because I like left first. And that's how I'm entering it in my spreadsheet. Now, what I've noticed just letting it warm up for a while and feeding it with 1 kilohertz for now is that the left channel, not super steady, not super uniform, whereas the right channel seems pretty rock solid. The left channel isn't varying a lot, but it's varying a bit more than the other channel. So I'll just have to do what I do. They're also not the same. And, you know, that's to be expected, I think. You know, the volume on this is not a stepped attenuator, it's a potentiometer. So that's the way it goes. It's a little odd to me that it's changing. The other thing I've noticed that I'm not going to be recording, though, is that there's a bit of a phase shift in the output at the low extremes and the high extremes, and that's typical also. So I'm going to do that now. I'm going to put on some music, put this on hyperlapse or whatever, because you don't need to see every detail. But what I'm going to be doing is I've got a 1/4 volt as my input level for left and right columns for all frequencies. And then I'm going to be recording these voltage levels here as my output level, and then my spreadsheet will calculate the gain and the relative gain that is relative to 1 kilohertz. And I'll change the frequencies as I go. While I'm doing that, I'm going to listen to some records that I picked up in Arkansas when I was there for the past couple of weeks. Got the newest M83, it's a soundtrack, an old John McLaughlin solo album, Tubular Bells by Mike Oldfield, Death, old proto-punk, proto-metal band from Detroit. Another prog album, Gong, Espresso. Something Chris turned me on to, Wet Leg, self-titled. Something that typically comes up as one of the greatest albums of all time. I've never listened to it. Grace by Jeff Buckley. And another brand new one, I think this came out this year also. Matt Berninger, did I get that right? Matt Berninger, I believe, is the lead singer-songwriter for The National. So I've been kind of into one of The National's albums and thought I'd pick up the latest from this particular singer-songwriter. Incidentally, got these at my buddy Wade's store in Fayetteville, Arkansas, called Block Street Records. And it's a world-class record store. You know, it's kind of better. It's pretty much better than both of the record stores in my town combined. You know, but that doesn't surprise me. Wade knows his music, knows his stuff. You know, he's been playing music for the last 40 years. He's been a fan of music for the last 40 years. And he's had this record store for a while. I don't know just how long. I didn't remember to ask him. But, you know, he's had plenty of time to figure out what he wants his record store to be like, how good he wants it to be, and that kind of thing. And it's a good record store. A lot of stuff. You know, relatively large compared to, you know, it's probably over twice as large as either of the record stores in my town, or larger than both of them put together. Has a lot of new records, but also a lot of used stuff. I mean, he definitely goes on some record hunting expeditions. So this is what I'll be entertaining myself while I do the relatively monotonous task of punching in these numbers. Well, here's the data. Here are the data. At maximum volume, getting about 18 dB of gain. Line in, you know, line level out. Or high level input, line output, or main output. Anyway, about 18 dB. But it's actually a little bit lower than that at 1 kilohertz. And here's what that gain relative to 17.8 dB at 1 kilohertz looks like. We got, you know, quite a bit of rolling off in the bass, coming up to, you know, pretty much, you know, just about 0 dB at 20 hertz. But then it comes up above, you know, to about almost a third of a dB above the level at 1 kilohertz in this bass region, up into the mid-range, and comes down finally, you know, to that 0 dB point right at 1 kilohertz, where it continues to drop off. And it's a little bit different between channels, but this is pretty minor. But we do see a drop off, you know, after it rolls up in the bass and holds pretty steady in that mid bass, or even mid range. I mean, this is, you know, what are we looking at? We're looking at 100 hertz. Okay, 100 hertz to 200 hertz here. and it was super stable, steady there, so I didn't fill that in with detail. Then after that, it drops off, and it kind of stabilizes in its drop off, but it does continue to roll off slightly all the way up to as high as I could go with the function generator on my phone. And I think it's interesting, that is that what I was hearing when I played it in my test rig was that it seemed a little rolled off in the highs. Not absent in the highs, but a little rolled off. And so we're seeing a roll off with frequency in the highs. So I guess, maybe that's just the McIntosh sound. Now, it took quite a while. I had to, once I got up here, I had to actually go back and redo the bottom once the left channel finally stabilized. It took the left channel quite a while to stabilize, and I don't know what that's due to. Is that a transistor or what? I don't know. Might be something to look into. Might just be you gotta let it warm up for a while. It's not gonna sound lousy before it finally comes up, but it's gonna, it was a little drop down in the left channel and wavering until it finally finished warming up, and then it was pretty much rock steady, rock stable, table stable, whatever. All right, let's check out these specs. So, frequency response. +0, -0.5 dB, 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz. Okay. So I normalized this to 200 hertz instead of 1 kilohertz, because that's where the most gain is. At 20 hertz, we're down -0.265 dB. At 1 kilohertz, we're down -0.31 dB. At 20 kilohertz, we're down -0.82 dB. So, not meeting specs there. Now, a word about this bumpiness. Not sure about that. I mean, some of that's just down to, only 3 significant figures of measurement. I think the main thing to take away here is that there is this trend. All right, so we're not meeting the spec there. Let's see, what else? There's a bunch of other stuff, but what are we actually testing here? We're testing voltage amplification in decibels. And so auxiliary tuner, tape 1 and tape 2, 2 main output, which is what we're doing, 20 dB. We're getting 18.1 max. And a little bit less than that, 17.8 at 1 kilohertz. So not meeting the spec there. Why? I don't know. I may want to change all of these film capacitors with new ones. I don't know what's causing the preamp to not quite be in spec. So, I may want to change a bunch of components to see if that'll put it in spec. And in particular, capacitor values, drifting capacitor values, or just capacitors that are leaking. And by leaking, I mean leaking DC current. I don't mean actually leaking liquid, although that's a thing too. Maybe those things are causing that greater than spec roll-off in the high frequencies. But, you know, I'm under the impression that roll-off in the highs is kind of the McIntosh sound. That's by design and not a fault. But, I don't know. You know, it's old. There could be enough things out of spec back here and here that's why it's not meeting its performance specs. Maybe. Don't know. Now, one thing I've been sort of wondering, and what to say in this, I guess this is a review of the McIntosh C28, not like it's a new item or anything, but, you know, what makes this special? What makes McIntosh special, as evidenced by this piece of equipment? You know, what makes this so super awesome as to be a McIntosh? Or what makes McIntosh so awesome in general? Well, I mean, we've got nice film caps. You know, it's all very tidy. I think these big transistors are something kind of special. I think it must be a power transformer in here. And, you know, ultimately the answer is I don't know. I mean, we saw the output. It's not flat. There is a sound built into this preamp. It has lots of great functions. I mean, these top panel controls are pretty awesome. So, ultimately, again, what makes it special? It's a Mac. It's beautiful. It's quality build. And if you like the sound, if the sound is for you, then yeah, it's awesome. But the sound isn't neutral. That I find a little disappointing. I thought that the sound would be more neutral, but I mean, I've also been told that McIntosh doesn't generally have a neutral sound. Ultimately, then, what do I think about the McIntosh C28? Well, first of all, it was a pretty good deal for $500. You know, I think this is restorable. It's never going to be perfect and pristine, but it can be worth a lot more than that $500 that I paid. And while I'm working on it, while I have it, I get to enjoy the McIntosh preamp, and I think that'll be neat. I will probably enjoy it. But I didn't buy it to keep it. It's not quite what I want. For a number of reasons. Now, I have wanted a McIntosh preamp, but I've wanted a McIntosh tube preamp. And that's not this. This is not that. The sound is pleasant, but it's not quite what I want. I want something that has a flatter response than this does. I played the Scorpions, and the Scorpions, you know, the high end didn't have the sparkle, the gleam, the even, you know, a bit of shrillness that it ought to. It sounded great with Seal, but it didn't sound right with the Scorpions. It, you know, that roll-off is noticeable. And so ultimately it's not what I want. I will move this along. Now, what do I want? Well, I actually already bought that. So let's just, you know, I will do a full video about this other piece that I bought, which is the Research LS15, which is a line level tube preamp. Scorpions sound awesome on the LS15. Everything sounds awesome on the LS15. It has a much more pronounced high end than this does. And it's a tube preamp. Now, what I paid for the LS15, I can maybe get for this when I resell it, if and when I resell it. And I think I will. It's just, the sound isn't really for me. Which is not to say that the sound isn't for a lot of people, but the sound isn't really for me. Again, it sounds pleasant, but with the Scorpions, you know, heavy metal, it doesn't quite sound right. And I think it might sound great with classical, you know, it'll take the edge off of those squeaky high violin sounds. And it'll throw in a little extra on the bottom end. But, you know, ultimately that's not quite what I want. Now, do I agree with my son Alden that
McIntosh is kind of for like snobby rich assholes, so you gotta play some shit that snobby rich assholes would play for it to sound good. Otherwise it's just fucked up.
Well, there is something to what he says. I mean, obviously he's being a bit hyperbolic, but, you know, there is something to that, you know, McIntosh has a certain clientele and a certain sound, and McIntosh clientele expects that sound. And it would seem that I'm, I guess, not that clientele. And I had suspected that that might be the case, which is why I bought the Audio Research. And I paid real money for the Audio Research. I didn't get a super awesome deal on that. I bought that one from the Music Room online. This, I got an excellent deal. And I just couldn't quite pass up the deal that I got on this. And, you know, I think this will make somebody very happy. You know, I will replace the parts that need replacing, and, you know, I've already done a lot of cosmetic work on it. I'm a little unsure what to do about the RCA jacks on the back. The outsides of those are awfully tarnished and kind of corroded. But I also don't want to go tearing up the back panel. There's not an obvious way to remove those. And so I will probably simply leave those alone, clean them up as best as I can, but not do anything dramatic or drastic to those. You know, it's a McIntosh. I don't want to destroy the original parts. But, you know, this has been fun. This is my first McIntosh. It is a beautiful piece, especially with the wood case. And I do think it sounds pleasant. It's just not quite for me. So, hope you got something out of the video. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, do all the algorithm things. Thumbs up, like, share, hype. That's a thing. What else? Leave a comment. Is McIntosh for you or not so much? If McIntosh is for you, were you able to get a super awesome deal like I got on this one? Or did you pay real money for it? Have somebody else do the resto work on it? You know, what I've done here is just a quick refurb. It needs some more work, and I will do that work. And maybe it'll, you know, if that work changes the frequency response, the gain, then I'll post an update. But I don't expect that work to actually change the sound really at all. But we'll see. Anyway. Hope you'll tune in again, and if you do, I will talk to you later. Cheers.